Hi there, hope you're well. In this video I'll be making this set of simple plywood shelves. This is the first in a series of basic builds that I introduced in my last video where I made a budget MFT bench, and I'll be using just these tools: a basic plunge saw, a drill driver, and new for this video, a set of cheap chisels for this build. The shelves are about as simple as you can get: a top and a base, two sides and two full width shelves between them, separated by dividers, with the whole thing sitting on a batten that's fixed to the wall. And like all pieces of fitted furniture, the size is dictated by the circumstances. It's around 1300 wide, 740 high, and about 140 millimeters deep. But let's start by going back to the beginning, when I just had the components cut and sanded. Now I'm just going to screw this together. Nothing fancy, nothing clever. We are going to cover the screw heads up with dowels. There's lots of ways in which you can do this. I'm going to do it the simplest way, because this is a basics build. And we're just going to do a slightly bigger hole, call that a counter bore. So the screw head goes about halfway, excuse me, halfway into the thickness of the material, and then you put a dowel on top of that just to cover it. So normally, when you're drilling for dowels, you need a particularly clean hole on the top face of the board. And the way you normally achieve that, the way that I would do it anyway, is by using a set of drill bits like these. These are called lip and spur, or sometimes brad point. They have a little pointy bit right at the end which locates the drill bit very precisely, and two very sharp side pieces that cut their way in very, very cleanly. These particular ones cost about the same as the plunge saw that I'm using today, so we're not going to use those on a budget build. The other way you can get a particularly clean hole from just a regular sort of twist drill like these is to drill through something, and the something, a little piece of 6mm scrap like this, protects the surface in the same way that a splinter guard on a guide rail on a track saw protects the surface as well. And because we're doing that, we can actually make up a little template that acts both as our drilling guide and keeps the holes in the same position as we go up, so that it all stays nice and neat and tidy. So that's what we're going to do next. I've made a little T-square from 6mm scrap, and once I've figured out the positioning, I can transfer those marks to the square and drill them out. I've wrapped tape around the drill bit as a depth guide, and with the two sides held together with tape, I can mark the position of the shelves using the shelf dividers and an offcut for the shelf thickness, and then mark the shelf centres. Then it's a simple matter to line up the drilling guide with the centre lines and drill out the counter bores in the sides and in the shelves for the dividers. So that's all the drilling done. It's gone okay. One thing you do need to be a little bit careful with if you're using tape to mark the depth like this is it has a habit of creeping further up. That started off as just about 15mm and it's ended up as almost 20, so you could easily get close to going through that. So if you're doing several holes like this, you need to be aware of that, keep checking it, or back off a little bit as you get towards the end. When it comes to fitting the dividers, I'm using my plastic bench dogs as guides to get everything set square, then drilling a pilot hole directly through the counterbore, adding in some glue and screwing everything together. You might need to pay a bit of attention to the order of construction as well, just to make sure you can still get your drill or driver in between the shelves. For the upper shelf and central divider, I've reset the bench dogs so I can bear against them, and I'm using the edge of the MFT top to make sure the shelf edges line up, and a couple of pieces of scrap cut to the same height as the divider to make sure that they stay true. And then we can fit the base in the usual way. Before I fit the right hand side, I need to cut a small rebate for the back, and I can do this easily with the track saw. Making a couple of passes to make up the 3mm depth. And then I can fit the side, again using the scrap wood dividers to make life easy and to make sure that the shelves don't wander while they're being fixed in place. And finally we can fit the top shelf. While the glue set's on that, I'm having a go at making my own dowels. This is an old Izzy Swan technique that I saw Michael Alm use recently, and you just drill a hole through a piece of scrap and put a countersink on it, and then cut the scrap down as close to the edge of the hole as you can. Clamp a chisel or a plane iron across the top at an angle, and then use the drill to drive some sawn stock through the hole. I use the chisel to knock the corners off the edges, but obviously if you have a hand plane that'd be easier. That is pretty amazing. Instant dowels. That's so silly and yet bizarrely satisfying. Yeah, I really genuinely was. I got loads of them as well. I was going to use my Sapili dowel, but I'm going to use this. This is good. It's pretty good. Look, the colour's not bad. Obviously it'll be end grain, but I'm not sure that'll matter. But yeah, pretty nice fit in there. Pretty snug. So I need to get however many, 8, 16, 20, 22, 26 of those cut. I'll get those glued in, and then while that's gluing, I can get looking at the batten and the other bits and pieces. With the dowels gluing, I can use the track saw to make 4mm deep cuts in the reverse of the batten. And then chisel out that rebate, working from both sides and using the plywood layers as a guide to how deep I need to go. This rebate makes up the difference between the stud wall and the brick wall. Then I can finish off with a chisel on the flat to clean up the back face. Obviously, if you have a hand plane, this would be a good time to use it, but you'll still need the chisel to clean up the very end. That's not so bad. A little bit lumpy here and there, but it's up against a wall, so it doesn't really matter. Just marked up quickly, roughly where the holes are going to be. So get that drilled out, get that offered up. Level. With the batten set level, I can drill pilot holes in the stud wall. I just gently use the drill to mark the paint on the brick wall where the hole needs to be. Then drill that through, starting with a small 4mm bit. Poor little drill, its battery is almost on its last legs as well. And then drilling out to 5mm for the wall plug. There we go. And that should just pop in there nicely. While I'm at it, I'll counterbore these holes. Then fix the batten down before repeating the process with the centre screw. A quick check to make sure it's still level, or level enough, and I can offer up the shelves just to make sure they fit. Not bad. That'll do. With the glue set, I can trim the dowels back with a chisel. Then give everything a quick rub down. I've decided to add a small shelf between the lower dividers. I like the idea of adding small boxes in there at a later date, so I've glued a piece of carefully trimmed down 12mm ply, just using offcuts of MDF to gauge the height. I think we can live with that. And while the glue set's on that, I can work on the front rail. I want to cut notches in this to keep my rail clamps handy, so I'm using the track saw to make several cuts 8mm deep and across the 12mm width of the notch. Then I can clean up the waste roughly with a chisel just to check the clamps fit. And then continue along the front rail making these trench cuts where I've marked them. Notice as well that I'm using the scrap that the rail is balanced on as a spoiler board to reduce tear out on the back of the rail. With the waste roughly cleaned out, I'm taping down a steel ruler to help give me a consistent edge, then cleaning up the base and size of the notches. And with the ruler removed and a quick rub down, I can glue the rail to the underside of the front shelf, simply clamping it in place. "20 minutes later and the glue's set enough to handle, so after a quick rub down I can apply beeswax finish to all parts of the shelves, taking care to apply plenty to the cut edges. The back is a piece of painted hardboard cut into two so that the join sits over one of the shelves. And I've just nailed this on with panel pins. I'm fixing a corner plate to the top right of the shelves, first drilling pilot holes, then countersinking the back so the plate will sit as flat as possible, and then fixing it down with the Loctite screws. These have a tiny head and are a perfect fit for these corner plates. And finally, I'm holding a block of scrap on the inside corner of the shelf to stop blowout and drilling through the fixing hole. Making sure I've got everything to hand, the shelves are an easy fit as the batten bears the bulk of the weight whilst I drill a pilot hole into the stud-work and fix it with a single screw. And then a low L bracket fitted further along the shelf secures it to the top. And a couple of Loctite screws fix the base to the batten. So there we are. Bit of a long one, this one, but yeah, nice. Simple little set of BirchPly shelves for the workshop, but made nicely as you might do for a customer, for a client. Obviously there's still a few more bits to do on this. We'll get a little bit of caulk in there just to tidy up that join. We've got to start using it, adding our clamps and bits and pieces in here. But this is essentially what it's for, just to have all this stuff handy. We'll get a couple of little boxes in here. We'll make those for a future video. Not a basics build, we'll do something a little bit fancier with those. But that's essentially what I've been missing. All this stuff that's been sort of spread around the rest of the workshop came off the shelves that were there originally, and a lot of that stuff can go back on there now, which is good for the rest of the workshop. Not necessarily so good for this. But I'm going to call this one done. Thank you so much for taking a look. It's been a long one, I know, and there's been lots of detail on it. There is an even longer version of this video out for my YouTube members and Patreon supporters. So if you want even more gory detail, go and check that out. But that's it for this one. Thank you so much for taking a look, and I'll catch you in the next one. All right, take care.